When you think of a quilt, what pops into your head? Probably comfort, right? Warmth, maybe a family heirloom. And yeah, all of that is true. But what if I told you that hidden in those stitches and scraps of fabric is a language, a history, a massive amount of data just waiting for us to read it?
So, on one hand, sure, a quilt is a comforter. It's a simple, practical thing to keep you warm. But on the other hand, it's a document. Seriously, every pattern, every choice of fabric, every stitched name can tell a story, memorialize a person, or capture a specific moment in time.
Just look at this number, 5,164. What is that? Well, that's how many individual records for the AIDS Memorial Quilt are held by the U.S. Library of Congress. Each one of those numbers represents a panel, a life, and a story, all carefully preserved not in a book, but in fabric. So today, we're going to peel back the layers on all this. We'll start with why they're so much more than blankets. Then we'll decode the secret language of their patterns. We'll see how quilts can tell these huge, epic stories, meet the global community that keeps this whole thing going, and finally, follow a quilt's wild journey from a real object into a digital database. Okay, first things first. Let's really lock in this idea. A quilt is so much more than just a blanket. And that brings us to the really fascinating part, the secret language of quilt blocks. You see, quilts aren't just random patchworks. They're built from these individual, named patterns called blocks. And you can think of each block as a word in a much bigger vocabulary. And the names themselves, wow, they tell you so much. Take a block called Drunkard's Path. Just that name alone tells you something about daily life, about struggle, and maybe even the dark sense of humor of the people who first designed it. Some block names are literally ripped from the headlines of their day. 50-40 or fight, that was a political slogan from the 1840s about the Oregon border dispute. So if you were stitching that block into a quilt, it wasn't just decoration, it was a political statement woven right into the fabric of your home. Others tap into these much older shared stories. A block called Job's Troubles immediately connects the person making it to this universal story of perseverance and faith. It's a way of talking about your own hardships through a symbol everyone understood.
And of course, some are just wonderfully human, right? A block called Contrary Wife. That gives you a little peek into domestic life, into personality, and the kind of everyday humor that gets stitched right alongside everything else.
And you know, this language is anything but dead. It is alive and kicking, passed down through this huge network. You've got online archives, university programs, national organizations, and local guilds all over the world, all sharing and evolving this vocabulary of stitches every single day. So if these individual blocks are like words, how do they come together to form whole sentences, or even epic stories? Well, let's look at two incredible quilts, made almost 100 years apart, to see how. First, let's travel back to 1894, to the Australian autographed quilt. At first glance, it's just a beautiful object, but its story is incredible. It began as a community project to raise money for a church organ. People paid a shilling to get their name stitched on it. But here's where the story takes a turn. It was ultimately auctioned to raise money for victims of a massacre in China. The quilt isn't just about this history, it is the historical record. And we know exactly how people saw this at the time, thanks to this little snippet from a local paper. It celebrated the women's ingenuity behind the whole idea. It's a direct window into the social context of the time. Okay, now let's jump forward 93 years. The year is 1987. The world is in the grips of a devastating new health crisis, and communities are desperate for a way to mourn, to remember, and to fight back. This is when the Names Project Foundation started stitching the AIDS Memorial Quilt. Each panel, just like the signatures on that 1894 quilt, represented a person. It became this incredible modern testament that took overwhelming statistics and made them personal, tangible, and impossible to ignore. So here's the point. Whether it's 1894 or 1987, quilts have always been this powerful tool for community action and remembrance. And this kind of powerful storytelling, well, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's all powered by this vibrant, interconnected global community. It's like a worldwide quilting bee. For instance, just look at the Aotearoa Quilters, the National Association in New Zealand. These people are not just sitting at home sewing. They are organizing color challenges, creating traveling exhibitions that go all over, and even showing their work internationally in places like France. It's a super dynamic and creative community. And this whole network is incredibly diverse. You've got formal academic programs like the Quilt Studies Certificate at the University of Nebraska. You have national guilds that are all about community. You've got historical societies carefully preserving local treasures. And then you have the big guns, like the Smithsonian, treating quilts as essential cultural artifacts for the whole world to see.
Now, in our world, the story doesn't end when that last stitch is sewn. These quilts are now beginning a digital afterlife, transforming from physical fabric into pure data.
It really starts with academic recognition. Quilt studies is now a formal, interdisciplinary field. Scholars are seriously looking at these objects not just as pretty crafts, but as complex artifacts that can give us deep insights into history, culture, and society.
And this really shows the modern journey of a quilt. So it gets created and used. Then maybe it's acquired by a museum. Scholars study it, figuring out its whole story. Then it's meticulously photographed, scanned, and cataloged. And finally, all of that information gets uploaded to a digital archive, making that quilt story accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world.
So the next time you see a quilt, whether it's in a museum or just on a bed, I really want you to look a little closer. Don't just see a blanket, see the data, see the language, see the stories. Because the big takeaway here is that the most extraordinary histories are often hiding in the most ordinary objects if we just take the time to learn how to read them.